Welcome to the follow-up after show, kind of our web extra to viewers. We expand and explore on some issues that we didn't get into the big show. I brought David Jesuit back with us for the after show. He's a professor and chairperson at Central Michigan University, kind of overseeing political science and public administration. We talked a lot about impeachment on the big show. We're going to go in a different direction. Let's talk about what's happening in Hong Kong. The violence there has escalated as the folks in Hong Kong are just going at sort of mainland China, who want to take away a lot of their freedoms. I know one of the big issues has to do that mainland China, the folks in Beijing, want to bring the folks from Hong Kong over to Beijing to face criminal proceedings if that's the case. They want free elections. That was another one that came out. So what do you make of that? Has the world in general, just sort of taken a hands off to China a little bit, letting them do China be China, despite what's going on there?
I'm so glad we're not talking about impeachment.
There'll be plenty of more time to do that, I'm sure.
Obviously, it's very important that the impeachment, but there are so many other important issues happening around the world, and probably Hong Kong, to me, is the most important other issue that we're not talking about. Mm-hmm. And you're right. This has to do with the special status of Hong Kong, and they've enjoyed greater freedoms than mainland China. Now, just recall that this return to China's rule when the lease expired, the British lease on Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. So they've had that special kind of autonomy. And it's, yes, as I understand it, it's really about the, getting extradition of criminals and sending them to mainland China as opposed to dealing with them mm-hmm. in Hong Kong. And so things have escalated. And I'm surprised, frankly, that they've escalated to the point that we see recently, with the occupation of the university and the escalation in the use of force by the police and a show of force by the People's mm-hmm. Liberation Army. They sent the army in there just to kind of clean things up, and they were wearing shorts and T-shirts, but the message was very clear that the patience of the Communist Party, the leaders mm-hmm. of People's Republic of China, for the protests is limited. It made me think of Tiananmen in 1989, yes. And
very much so.
Quite
sure.
frankly, I thought, are we going to see that again? Are we going to see another crackdown, and then it'll just be as if it never happened? Mm-hmm. And the rest of the world, China's a powerful country, and we'd like to think that the United States could do something to make China change its behavior, or the United Kingdom, and it's not that easy. It's not that easy. These are to persuade China to change, its policy. They do see that this is an internal right. affair. That really they've given warnings as well to Western powers, the United States, United Kingdom. This is none of your business. Stay
sure.
out.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned that I think it was the Senate made a resolution condemning what
yep.
was happening over there, condemning mainland China, Beijing, not
yes.
the protesters. They were supporting the protesters. That's probably not enough, and the other question becomes, as the president and the White House continues to negotiate on tariffs in China, it feels to me like he wants to play nice in the sandbox to not kind of upset them, because he wants to see where the tariffs go. I'm sensing that.
That's why I was a bit surprised
yeah.
that the Senate,
yeah.
Republican-controlled Senate, went ahead. They had adopted this by consensus. It's a difficult issue, but it puts the president in a difficult position because he is trying to get a trade deal done, right. And Senate Leader McConnell has called on President Trump to condemn China, to voice support for the protesters, and thus far he hasn't done that. And he hasn't done that, I think, in large part because he wants to have the trade deal completed. And the trade with China is enormous, and mm-hmm. it has enormous consequences for the U.S. economy. Yeah. And it's something that, quite frankly, is in U.S. national security, U.S. economic interest to complete this trade deal. So it does put the president in a bit of a difficult position. He's expected to, voice support for the protesters, for the pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong, and yet he wants to complete this this deal. And so I fear that before too long the army will come in and there will be a restoration of order, and that this in fact will have the opposite of what the people of Hong Kong want. The effect of this will be greater control of Hong Kong by mainland China, not greater autonomy. So I fear that now. I hope I'm wrong. I think that, another event in 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall, that's the other example. Maybe sometimes history, it surprises us, and rather than cracking down and shooting people, they tear down the wall. And so I'd love to be optimistic and hope that that other example from 1989 prevails. But my other side, and I just don't see that as happening. And then we'll see what happens in terms of whether or not this actually inspires others around the region. Singapore has been brought up as a soft authoritarian regime, or even mainland China. Will this serve, will there be a demonstration effect, and will this kind of serve as a call to other groups, others to mobilize against authoritarianism in Asia? I mean, we'll see.
The other thing I wanted to touch on you before I let you go, in relationship to this, you're at Central Michigan University.
Yes.
You're in political science, public administration. You're teaching an international relations class.
Yep.
So you're talking with the students. You're bringing this up. What has that been like? What are their thoughts? And having said that, it's a lot of young people.
Yes.
It's a lot of college-age kids that are behind this. I was over in China 4 or 5 years ago when this sort of first started on them. Their concerns about the voting rights and that kind of thing, and that subsided after a while. This is a much stronger thing. So what do the college kids think about this?
Well, you're right. I teach. I'm chairperson, so I don't teach as many classes as I normally would because I'm doing other administrative things. So a class I'm teaching now is international relations, and we don't really have the occasion in that class to talk about, it's not U.S. foreign policy, so I'm not really talking about the presidency. Impeachment doesn't really come up that much, and the few times I'm trying to think of where it's come up, it's related to the U.S. foreign policy aspects of this current impeachment trial. China, on the other hand, is something that is more important in the Introduction to International Relations course, and students really are following it pretty closely. Now, I have students who are, that's what many of them want to study international relations, but they're pretty well informed, and there are a lot of other things in terms of ethnic cleansing. The Muslim minorities of China are really being systematically rounded up and placed into camps for re-education. And there are some very, very troublesome human rights violations that we see. And we're not really talking about it too much. We feel like there's little that can be done, but the students are following it. And with impeachment, we've had a special, the department, we brought students together and some faculty. We made it a conversation, coffee, cookies, and definitely, our students, again, they're following things closely, as you would hope that they follow things closely. I think that they had a lot of questions as well about the process, the history, what does this mean? It comes up, but I think that some people might have the impression that all we do is talk about current events, and gosh, I'd like to talk about current events more, but we have to carve out the time to talk about current events because we are talking about, the concepts, the theories, and trying to get students to understand the world more systematically to find how they're related.
Well, it's good you're keeping it out there. Thanks again for coming in.
Happy to do it.
And thank you for joining us on the After Show.